Sean. Go.
Good to go.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Bring the regular board meeting, the Tahoe Trucking Sanitation Agency for June 19th to order. Start with roll call.
Director Wilson,
Here.
Director Smelser,
Here.
Director Cox.
Yes.
Director Wilkins
Present.
and President Chesson.
Yes, here. At this point, I'll rise and we'll do the pledge of allegiance. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to open the meeting for public comment. Anybody wishing to address the board on an item that's not on the agenda may do so at that time. If there is anybody, ask that they come up to the dais and introduce themselves. And good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, board members and staff. I'm Barney Dewey, and I'm here to announce my candidacy to run for the Tahoe Donner PUD board. My website is electbarney.com. I believe I have the technical and leadership skills that will make me an excellent fit for the board. My primary goal is to guide the TUD in progress toward the 100% renewable in a way that makes sense for trucking. As we work toward the state mandates, we must do what's best for our residents. We all feel pinched by the sting of rising costs living here. To maintain our year-round community, we must pay careful attention to the decisions that we make now and in the coming years. Second, we need to make smart local infrastructure investments. We must prepare our power grid for increased electrical demands and ensure our electrical supply, even with failures from out-of-state sources. We need to make thoughtful investments to maintain our excellent water quality. Third, we need stronger partnerships between the local agencies. We need to be more efficient in wildfire mitigation efforts. These same partnerships can ensure our building codes are in sync across agencies to make it easier for builders, businesses, and homeowners to complete their construction projects. We need to make broadband work better for trucking through partnerships. My experience and skills from being the chief engineer at a radio station to leading a 30+ person team at Apple and leading wireless analysts provides me with a unique perspective that will help the PUD and community. I'm confident we can do what's right for the planet and for the people in our town if we manage this progress in a way that works best for trucking. For more information about me and what I want for trucking, please visit my website, electbarney.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you taking the time to come. Good luck in the election.
Thank you very much.
Is there anything else? Yes.
Just a question about the rate increase, that's why I'm here. Is it time to speak about that, or?
You're talking about
The sewer
the
rate, the sewer
connection fee? With that is agendized later, and so you'll have an opportunity in the public comment on that.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking. Is there anything else from the public on an item not on the agenda? Michelle, did we receive any written comments?
No, sir.
No? Okay. At this point, I'm going to close public comment and we'll move to item 3, professional achievement awards, anniversaries, and staff acknowledgement.
Good morning, President Treesan and directors. Thank you from Human Resources Administrator, and as we do on a monthly basis, I would like to acknowledge a couple of staff for their achievements and anniversaries. And the first one would be promotion of Kristen Schrant. Kristen was promoted from chemist 2 to chemist 3. Great job. And then second, and equally as impressive is Zed Snyder, who is celebrating his 10-year anniversary here at PNC. Great job. I mean, I just, that's pretty awesome. We're just saying, so, anyway, thank you.
Okay. On behalf of the board, congratulations, Kristen and Zeb. Thank you, guys. We will move on to item 4, our consent agenda. Is any of the board interested in pulling any of the consent items? No? Any public comment on the consent items?
Approval of the consent calendar.
We have a motion by Director Wilson. Seconded by Director Cox. Any other further comment? Not? Actually, my motion items here. Great, all in favor? Say Aye.
Motion.
Consent agenda has been approved. We'll move on to the regular agenda. Item 1 is a public meeting, for public comment related to the board's consideration adopting a proposed sewer connection fee ordinance, adjusting the agency's sewer connection fee and making related amendments. I will open the public meeting at this point. And, does staff have a presentation prepared?
Yeah.
Would you like to give prior to?
So Elizabeth will give the presentation.
Okay.
Good morning, President, members of the board, staff, and members of the public. I'm here today to do a slight review of some information that we looked at in April, as well as tee up the public meeting for changing the ordinance related to the sewer connection charges. You'll go to the next slide. Thank you. This should seem like a familiar graph. We took a long look at it, not just at finance committee, but at the April board meeting. So I'll give you a few quick reminders of how the graph works. So what we're trying to show here is how much money we have coming in, where our target balances should be, how much money we have going out. So the blue bar is where we begin our year, right? We have money in the bank right now, right? The orange part of the bar shows what revenue is anticipated during the fiscal year noted. Total, yes?
And just to step back, because I know we have at least one person in the audience that's probably not as immersed, possibly as the rest of us. There's a specific fund the district keeps monies in specifically for capacity related. Maybe you could explain this fund and the sources of revenue and the restrictions on its expenditures.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
For that. So Fund 2 is a wastewater capital reserve fund. Connection fees, what we're here to talk about today, the only money that goes into this account. We can only spend it on growth projects. It can't be used for what we call Fund 6, where we're doing rehab, replacing, things like that. This is only for new growth projects. It is a restricted reserve, as the president mentioned, so there is not a lot that we have the ability to move around with it. So we took a look just at our Fund 2 money. So this is not all agency funds. It is only funds related to sewer connection charges and the money that has been in the bank over the years for us as we've collected these charges. Everyone on the same page?
That's great, thank you.
Okay. So the bars represent the balance, the amounts that are in the account, as well as projects out for the next 5 years. The blue bar, as I mentioned, is money that we anticipate being the beginning balance from year to year. The orange is what we earn in the year. The yellow is the target balance representation. The current fund policy states that we should have 50% of the current plus the future 4 years on hand so that we're in a successful business situation. The gray line represents our Fund 2 anticipated revenues. Anticipated expenditures. So you have money in the bars, money out in the gray line, where we need to keep our reserve level in the yellow. Make sense to everyone? Questions about how the chart works? So this is our base case. This assumes that no fee increase is approved today. What this results in is that we no longer meet our minimum targets after FY 26. You can see the bars are below the line. Good indicator. We also have a negative fund balance when we get 5 years out. That should start to cause a little bit of concern. So if we take a look at the next slide. The next slide assumes that we implement this 79.2% increase, which equates to a little over $3,000. The chart works the exact same way. You see that we don't actually run out of money in this 5-year look, but we still fall below our targets. It pushes the situation out a year, but it does not solve the problem. So we still have work to do. Looking at increasing the sewer connection charges through the ordinance in the act today buys us some time, but this is something we have to continue to revisit based on our capital expenditure priorities. So that is a little bit of history and background on where the account is and the importance and the impact of what happens if we don't do the ordinance today.
With the connection fee that we're talking about changing, that is a one-time fee for new customers. It's not an ongoing charge to existing customers, right?
Correct. So one-time connection. At this point, does the board have any questions or additional points of clarification?
Well, the one question I would say, looking at fiscal year 30, we would anticipate another raise down the line in 4 years or whatever.
So I wouldn't say that we would anticipate that based on looking at this chart. Based on recommended business practices, you need to inflate these costs every single year to keep up with the cost of construction. Every 12-month period, construction costs more. I haven't seen it, at least in my lifetime, go down too much. The other piece is that anytime there is a significant or material change to the capital improvement program that spends this fund, it needs to be revisited. The last time these fees were increased was 2004. So it's been 20 years. It was time to take a look at it and see what's happening. What you'll notice in the packet, there was also a draft policy that was included, and I'm getting a little ahead, but that draft policy covers that gap. It recommends that every year the board take a look at the construction, take those costs so that we don't have this huge gap again.
And Liz, what is our, Dave, did you have another question?
No.
Our current connection fee is how much?
$5,000
And that's $5,000 per,
EDU, equivalent dwelling unit.
and is that a flat fee? Or how do we, the majority of our customers in the Tahoe Truckee area are residential. There's not a lot of commercial and very next to no industrial. But I believe 5 years ago, we adjusted from a house at the house and everybody paid $5,000 to at the request of in part, a request from the Mountain Housing Council and the affordable housing issues, we went to a variable rate. So what actually is a residence is not charged? They're not all charged $5,000 now. It's a,
Correct. I'm gonna pause right there on that question and phone a friend. I have a friend on the line and I would like to see his face pop up on the screen. Sean, are you there? Sean, our consultant from HDR who wrote the connection fee report and did the last report as well, is here.
Good
There he
morning.
is.
Yes, so
We're working on hearing you. I can see your lips move, but I can't hear you yet.
Hang on. Go ahead.
does that work better now?
Welcome to the meeting, Sean. Thanks for being my phone friend.
Absolutely. So there's two pieces to the proposed fee, and it's the same approach that we had in 2019 when the fee was adjusted to include a minimum component, which is the same for all customers, and the remaining fee is all based on the square footage of the new home or business connecting to the agency's system. So there's a small piece or a smaller component of the fee on average based on that flat amount, and then the rest is all proportional based on square footage.
so we're continuing that as part of this connection fee adjustment. we're continuing that methodology where there's this base amount and then a square footage amount going forward, but it's rising by the 79%.
Correct.
And we went to that variable rate, if I recall, so that if there was a affordable housing project with smaller size units, they would actually be paying less than that 5,000 or that $3,000 increment plus some that we're looking at adjusting multifamily units with houses, units 800 or 1,200, anything under 2,000 square feet, actually pay less than that. And then units larger than that, based on the assumption that there's more fixtures in the house, and therefore the potential to produce more wastewater would pay more than that, but in average, we assume that you're gonna end up with that, the numbers that you cited, the 5,000 and the 9,000.
Yes.
And this, just to reiterate, the last time the base fee was increased was 2004.
20 years ago.
I was much younger then.
Me too.
Thank you.
Any other questions or points of clarification from the board?
I
Do we
think that's
want
good. We might keep you up there or be available. I know that we had at least one gentleman interested in talking and having questions on this. Any questions from the board, more questions from the board for the lid or staff? Now I'll open this item up for, public comment.
Good morning, my name is Patrick Sarso, I'm the owner of the Lost Rock Laundromat in Tell City. And we are in the process of starting a commercial facility here in Trenton. Looking at the connection fees right now, you have just that base 5,000 for a washer. And there's 2 points to this. One is we're looking at a commercial facility and I can put in smaller machines. And it's 5,000, 5,000, 5,000, 5,000. And let's say each one of those machines uses 50 gallons of water. Or I can put in one big machine and it's still $5,000, but that machine is gonna use 600 gallons of water. I wanted to know why there's one set fee for all of that. The difference in consumption of water and use of what's going down the drain is drastically different in the washing machines. And I think a lot of it was based on data from 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, where a top loader used on average 35 gallons of water. And that was a huge thing. Now they're using about 16 gallons. And then some of the high efficiency washers are down into we have a row of ours in Tahoe City are down at 11 gallons. So it's, for us, we're looking at another part of this is that if you haven't been to Kings Beach, that community is a lower income community. It has a laundromat right now that will not be there probably 5 to 10 years ago, just with the state of the building and the condition of the machines. And for anybody to go in and that community will be in need of a laundry facility for their members. And for anybody that wants to, that would be able to build that facility, the connection fees alone would make that project cost prohibitive. And that's something I'd like the board to consider with these rate increases. If you're looking at almost $9,000 per machine and putting in 20, 30 washers for that community over there, which they will need. And if you don't believe me, go look at that laundromat. It's on its last legs. That just makes it cost prohibitive, and that's really detrimental to that community. And then back to here in Truckee, we are gonna put in the larger machines because their cost is so high for the smaller ones. And so just take that into consideration that as a business owner, I understand that the financial part of it, but I'm also looking at our end. We're not gonna put in smaller machines to use less water. We're gonna go big because it's the same price.
Rochelle, do you have the ability to bring up page 35 of the board packet?
Sure.
That shows the proposed connection charges by type. And then, again, maybe we call on Sean or staff to, my recollection was, or maybe at one point there was more than just one laundromat unit price, and the reason for us to have consolidated that down to a single, connection fee for the number of washing machines with, no distinction between, I guess, these larger industrial units and the smaller, maybe what you call residential type washer.
Blake, would you like me to respond to that?
Sure.
Okay. No, so that's a good question, and comment, as well from the gentleman that just spoke. And the laundromats are a little bit of a tricky one, but one of the key issues here is that we're basing the fee and the relationship on an equivalent dwelling unit, which is essentially our single family home. So when we think about how a laundromat is used, or how the wastewater generated from that versus a single family home is it's different. That's why it's very similar when you think about the number of washes, whether it's 11 gallons or 16 gallons. There is a different, agree with the a bigger commercial. And as part of this, I think there's some of this that needs to be, as you go through, and we mentioned this when we talk about the different fees, there may be some exceptions to this that can be evaluated by the agency as you go through this when someone comes through to build a new laundromat. And that would be the other thing I'd say is if somebody takes over, as the example in Kings Beach, if someone takes that over, they're not paying another connection fee. That facility has essentially paid their connection fee at one point in time. Now, if it's a brand new laundromat, then that would be a different situation.
Thanks, Sean. The staff, I'm just curious, the consolidation to that, and Sean, what I'm hearing is, someone like Patrick, I apologize, I forget your last name.
Patrick's fine.
Comes to the district. Are you saying that perhaps we have the opportunity to modify this based on? I mean, there is some logic. I understand some logic between, different size units and that, and so. And I guess maybe I want to take a step back and confirm with staff. We're hoping to take action on adoption of this, including this sheet up here with the proposed rates with an effective date of January 1. So there's some time, if I'm not familiar with laundromats. I looked at it, it sounded like it made perfect sense. For a member of the public to share some experience with us for us to consider that. At this point, I don't know that we are gonna potentially take action on that, but it's certainly something that we can explore. It was simple to have, I guess, a single unit there, but that doesn't necessarily reflect reality in the field. So I appreciate you paying attention to this and bringing that to our attention. Any other?
I got a question, Sean, what you're saying that is, if an existing laundromat has already had and paid their connection fees, they would not be encumbered by this, rate increase, seeing how they, already are existing?
That is correct.
Okay, so, Patrick, I don't know if this would have any effect on, your presentation. The laundromat you own in Towel City is existing?
Correct. The one I own in Tell City is existing, and we actually just filed paperwork to reduce our number of connections. Because we have no plans on adding more machines. Number wise, we'd be adding capacity. And since the fee is the same, we take two top loaders out and put one big machine in. The Kings Beach laundromat, that building was built in 1952. And it's on its last legs. And it wouldn't be a situation where somebody could just go in and put new machines in and the connections are all there. That would be the building has to come down. It would be a rebuild, and in that case, that's where the fees are reincurred.
So,
That's not true.
If
just
it's
for my,
tear down, If it's a tear down of from what I was told when I called at one point, if it's a tear down, it's a new bill.
No,
No,
it stays with the parcel.
with the parcel.
If it's built on that same parcel, it stays there. Those allocations and those funds stay on that parcel. You couldn't relocate it down the road, but if it stays there, you can tear it down and rebuild it and all those allocations.
Okay,
So does that help you at all, Patrick?
that helps with that, assuming that the building owner would sell.
So, for clarification, if they tore the building down and the existing place where the building is now, they would not have to pay connection fees if they rebuilt in the same location using the same footprint and so on. Their connection would go on with the parcel.
Yes.
Okay.
The only way that they would have to pay additional connection fees would be if they increase the number of machines.
Correct.
And so it would be incremental, so say there's 25, and the other 5 would be
Yeah.
incremental.
And that would also apply for the change of ownership?
It stays with the parcel.
Does that help you, Patrick, with,
It's still back to getting that owner to sell, is what it would come down to.
I think you have a logical concern.
Yeah.
On my end, I just wondered, what kind of financial impact this new regulation or new rate increase would have on your particular business?
It's for anybody that's gonna do a laundromat in King Beach, if it's not on that property, it will be cost prohibitive. Is that 20, it'd be 20 times, a minimum of 20 times, 8,009, where is it up there? It was 80, it's almost $9,000, I think, or 8,000, some change. $160,000 in connection fees. At the minimum, just to have a viable business of that size, you need about 20 lockers would be the smallest. That's a big chunk of change for a small business to put out for commission.
Sean, are you still online?
Yep.
Corn. So, yeah, I can see, these kind of conversations coming up for any number of these different use, I mean, every one of these use types that we've identified. Yeah, there's always gonna be variations one way or the other, so I'm just curious what the process would look like, and maybe it's a question for staff, so if someone came in with a project proposal and wanted to interface with TTSA regarding the connection fees and kind of put forward a case as to why I'm doubting that we would have many people coming in saying, I think my fee is too low, but like in this instance, my suspicion is that the washing machine we're talking about is probably a relatively small one. It's not like an industrial sized washing machine. So in your example, they're putting in bigger machines, you probably get more capacity than what this than what this is envisioning, right?
Yeah.
So it can cut both ways, right? Folks can kind of work the system to their benefit. I guess the question is if there's a specific use that comes in that wants to suggest that there's something about their use that is going to result in them generating less effluent that we're going to have to deal with here at the plant, then what is being assumed in our connection fee table? What is the process for a person to appeal that look like?
I'm gonna have to ask Celeste, have we asked someone to go through an appeal process for a connection fee? On any connection fee?
Yes.
So you have a written process that exists?
Yeah.
That would, once the ordinance is passed, it would have to be heard by the board.
Yeah.
So someone wants to come into the project and say, I don't think this table accurately reflects my impact on the wastewater stream. Here's why I think it's out of line. I want to appeal for a different
Yeah,
fee.
we do have an appeal process in place already.
it allows for that to be considered on a case-by-case basis if it's appropriate.
And how often do you appeal that?
A year.
Yeah, and you could do like a common questions to the board as opposed to staff.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a mechanism to deal with one-off situations that may arise.
And a lot of the, these, types of connections are actually scalable. You know, swimming pool or spa is not a set rate regardless of the size of the swimming pool or spa. It's got a, you know, number of units based on its size. And so, again, I think we made a decision here to call a washing machine regardless of its size. It's something that, you know, we can continue to explore, and there is an appeal process available as well. But I think it's worth us taking into consideration, you know, if there is a rationale for that. Again, a lot of these items, a lot of commercial items are based on number of fixture counts. And so they're scalable that way as well. So, appreciate you, Patrick, bringing that to our attention.
Thank you.
Great. We're in public comment period. I saw a member with a cat shirt on
Yes.
come in. Figured it was on this topic.
I thought it was a cat costume today, so you know who I was. My name's Edward Bento, I'm the executive director of CAT. I apologize for being late to the party on this. I missed some of the presentation. I just want to make the point for CAT and our members that we understand there's a cost to doing things. Just like in business, there's cost rise, the same in government. As I look through the report, I think in one case for single, family homes, there was an increase of 57%. Some case almost 60. I didn't go into the rest of the staff packet, so I'm not sure what's in there, but it looked to us like the recommendation was to just from one year to the next, jump up to 60% for the sewer connection fees. Am I correct in that?
The nominal increase is actually more than that. It's
Okay.
going from 5,000 to close to 9,000, so it's like a 79%.
Yeah, so
increase.
it's a significant increase. And again, we understand that there's cost to doing everything. I mean, in business, you try to make a profit and stuff, and government, you try to service your citizens. And you try to mitigate the cost as much as possible. We would simply just ask that you don't go from one year to the next with a large increase, that maybe you consider an incremental increase. And that you also don't go several years without that. So all of a sudden, people just get hit. If government, had a competitor and you did this like a business would, all of a sudden raises prices like that, you'd probably be hard pressed to find new customers or keep the ones that you have. So simply stating again, we understand there's cost to doing what you do. But at the end of the day, we serve the citizenry, and just an incredible increase like that, I think would hurt what we're trying to do, especially in our area with helping affordable housing and things of that nature. So I was agree with that. Thank you.
And thanks, Ed, for coming in. I'm not sure whether you caught the discussion. We do have a variable rate, which was in part a response to requests from the Mountain Housing Council and CAT to have lower connection fees for smaller square footage homes
Yes, I
than
saw.
larger ones, and that continues to be kept in place. Again, we haven't raised rates for 20 years. With this rate increase that we're catching up for 20 years of inflation, we're adding a ability on an annual basis to look at the change in construction cost index so that we don't just set the rate today and immediately fall behind as inflation goes on, and keep our connection fees hopefully in line. And so barring some change in our capital plan, which we want to look at more frequently also, we should stay even, and there'll be annual, much smaller adjustments along the lines of a CPI number, and not be back in this predicament where we're seeing a, a big 20+ year catch up, to make up for that difference.
Yeah, we've seen that with other districts and agencies around the area where they didn't raise rates for a long time and they find themselves all of a sudden with incredible increases that kind of create a sticker shock to people. So we just ask that happen. As just a matter of doing business that you revisit, not every 20 years, not every 10 years.
Right.
Or 5, but continuously, so people don't feel that pain. And I'm aware of the ADU situation. But I'm also looking at single family homes and those increases as well. So.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Erin Casey. I'm the CEO for the Tahoe Housing Hub. We're a new nonprofit based in the North Lake Tahoe Truckee area, focusing on bringing workforce housing to the community. And I'm here just to comment on the component of the study specific to accessory dwelling units. And I appreciate that there is the exemption for ADUs under 500 square feet. I also want to note that I totally understand the situation you're in, given that you haven't raised rates in a long time. You need to raise them because you're trying to catch up, plus costs continue to increase. So that makes sense. That said, I'm wondering if at some point, given that this doesn't go into effect until January, if there may be an opportunity to have conversations with your board and staff regarding the opportunity to either further reduce either that base fee or consider a fee offset program where some of those fees get covered for accessory dwelling units that meet certain criteria. Perhaps they're deed restricted, something along those lines. ADUs are, in terms of the data that we have, the number of ADUs are steadily increasing, particularly in the town of Truckee when it comes to construction. However, there are still some significant impediments, and cost to develop the projects is part of that. And like you all are trying to address your financial challenges, I think there is some of that happening when it comes to bringing housing to the community and figuring out the best way to make more housing accessible to people, but doing so in a way that people can actually afford to build those units. And so what's the right balance between incentivizing or helping to get more housing, but ensuring that agencies like this one remain whole and are able to continue to provide services? There are example programs in the state of California where there are fee backfill or offset programs to cover costs for qualifying projects. That is a program that the Housing Hub is interested in piloting perhaps, and we'd like to have conversations with you to consider something like that, which would keep you whole, but also help reduce costs for a homeowner who might like to build an accessory dwelling unit. And I just wanted to note as well that my guess is that you as an agency also struggle with staffing when it comes to commuting and finding housing. ADUs are an interesting strategy in that you can build a very small ADU studio size. Some of them are 150 square feet. So that meets the needs of some members of our community, but you can also build a 1,200 square foot 3-bedroom accessory dwelling unit. There are examples of that in our region that meet needs of those that have families in the community. So I do think that a program like a fee offset as a companion to some of the other efforts happening in our region around housing, specifically ADUs in particular, is something that could be very powerful and can further help us address our housing issues. So I just wanted to offer that up. And I've had some preliminary conversations with Richard, your general manager, on that. I know many of you represent other organizations, and just wanted to offer that, see if there might be an opportunity to have those discussions, particularly given the timeline between today, your potential approval of this, and then the date that these capacity or connection fees would actually go into effect. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
You bet.
I'm glad you've been in touch with Richard. The agency is going to adopt this ordinance. And say it's overdue. But like any ordinance or resolution or any action the board takes, those can be updated over time. And so, I mean, yes, we are implementing this. You know, we try and create the best policy for the community and for the agency. But as new information comes forward and with staff and where appropriate, come to the board meetings to address the board, you know, those ordinances can be updated. So there's nothing, I don't think, generally, we don't like updating them probably every single month. That's confusing for the customer base, but it is not gonna be another 20 years, I'm sure, before it gets updated, and the housing market is dynamic. So we recognize that.
Thank you.
Any other comments on connection fees from the public?
That's a question.
Of course.
So you said you're adopting the ordinance. I just want to be clear on what ordinance you're talking about. I don't know what vote you're gonna take today.
Right now, we're in a public meeting to hear comments. After this public comment period ends, we'll take consideration on ordinance to adopt the change in connection fees. It has a proposed implementation or effective date of January 1. So those
Okay.
things would not take effect until someone comes in.
So I guess my concern was how you phrased that sentence, that you were adopting that, but you haven't taken a vote yet.
Correct.
So how do you know you're adopting that without taking a vote?
We'll find out in the next few minutes.
Right. I might
Well, that's
have
not what he said, though.
been presumptive in saying that.
Okay, I just wanted to clear that out.
That's fine.
Because, you know, okay. Just wanted to make
The
sure.
vote is gonna be before us. The vote is not happened.
Okay, well, I know it hasn't happened.
Right.
But I just wanted to clear out what you said,
Okay.
so, thanks.
Any other public comment? Any comments from the board in the public meeting portion of this item? Okay, at this time, I'm going to close the public meeting. Item 1, and now move to item 2, which is consideration and approval of ordinance 01-2024 for the increase of the agency sewer connection charges.
Back. So continuing on with our conversation related to the sewer connection charges, I wanted to look at the next slide. I just wanted to highlight that, per government code, we just held a public meeting. The public had a chance to respond, interacted with the board. The ordinance, again, as we're talking about it in average, updates the sewer connection charges by 79.2%. From $5,000 to $8,961 per EDU. Again, this is a 20-year span that we're catching up from. It will be effective January 1, 2025. Included in the packet and also requested as part of the board action is that you consider the draft policy that's considered in the packet. I do have one change to it though, that I believe came from some conversation from finance committee. The policy allows us to follow industry best practices. We will have those annual updates that we spoke of earlier during public comment for the ENR CPI for the 20 cities average. We would recommend that we base that from an August to August standpoint. The fees as of now are through August 2023. So we would not take this effect until January 1, 2026. So the benefit of this is that there's always a 12-month lag. So there'll be plenty of time to prepare for the increase in fee. Construction will know ahead of time what it's going to be and have 12 months to be able to come together to come to full permit before we change the fees. So those were the highlights that I wanted to bring out for the ordinance and the draft policy. At this time, does the board have any questions about what is before them?
I have one question about building a smaller house. You pay your connection fees and then at a certain point you add on to that house 500 square foot or less. You pay no connection fee.
Correct.
That's-
That is my understanding. If my understanding is incorrect, my phone friend will say something right now.
I have a nod from down there.
Perfect. We're all in agreement.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Dale?
I think this is a really eye-opening situation for the agency and for the board. being faced and having the public be faced with a 79% increase in connection fees, reflects, and I hate to use this word, but I'm going to, because I run a business for a long time. And anyone in any kind of business that doesn't raise their rates for 20 years are totally, it's just beyond me how anything like this could happen. I've been on this board for a very long time. And I was always very proud of this agency being a well-oiled machine. We treated the effluent, and there was really, as the board would, in the past had addressed this, really no reason to raise the rates because we were operating a very efficient and effective operation. But at the same time, we were getting presentations from our consultants like Sean Korn that said we should raise or at least address raising the rates every 2 to 3 years just to keep up with inflation. And we've never done that. And I just have a problem with not raising the rates for almost 20 years. It just is not good business acumen. And I think that this is a very eye-opening situation for all the boards that do things like this in the public arena. And quite frankly, I'm a little bit embarrassed for us because I think that it shows poor business judgment. And for us to sit back and have this kind of impact on the construction industry and individuals like Patrick with his situation, to me, as a trustee in this operation, I'm embarrassed for myself and I'm embarrassed for our agency. It's just not good business practice. And there's nothing we can do about it. The numbers speak for themselves. But for 20 years, the public has gotten a good deal. And unfortunately, we have to play catch up. And to me, it's embarrassing. But it's reality. That's my comment.
I would just like to say, Dale, you're absolutely right. Any organization or business that hasn't raised their prices in 20 years would either be out of business or suspect. But I think there's another foundational point to this, is that this amazing facility here is 50 years old. And it was world-class when it was built. And I think we owe it to the community to make sure that we continue that. I think that's a high bar, but the infrastructure has diminished considerably. And I think that this is a key component going forward to rectify that situation and better serve the constituents and the people in our communities. And the last thing I will say is you spoke eloquently about your experience on the board. I think that our organization and the staff in this facility has a much clearer vision of how the communities we serve will be impacted. And I applaud the people that have spoken today because you really communicated some great things. But the foundational components of this is that our infrastructure needs help. And we need to be much more cognizant of how we do these increases going forward. And I think we need to not wait 20 years.
Thanks, Dan. Additional comments?
No.
Hey, so we have before us ordinance 01/2024. I remember, do I bring it back to a public comment, council, or?
You've received public comment on these
Yeah.
issues, you should probably, because it is separately agenda, you should probably open it up for public comment, but I would assume that those who've spoken already are not going to be speaking.
Yeah.
Because they already have opportunity.
Is that correct, you guys? I think we've heard you.
Well,
yeah.
okay, but-
I do have a question though.
Sure.
The chart that you had up, it was based on connection fees for new construction. What do you do if there's a downturn in the economy and nobody's building? Where does your money come from for the infrastructure then? And what do you do as time goes on and there's less and less construction available for just new building going up? What's the board's plan for that scenario?
Great question. So, we've got two main sources of revenue. One of them is the connection fees. That's related to capacity related infrastructure. And so ideally, we're setting a rate to account for the growth, and as growth diminishes, the need for growth related projects goes down. The other larger source of revenue for the district is annual connection fee or service charge. And that handles fund, and Liz didn't talk on it because it wasn't a topic here, Fund 6, which is our repair, replacement, and rehabilitation fund. That's actually got much larger capital needs, but also has a much larger revenue stream, and that's handled by ongoing charges the customers pay. So you as a laundromat owner are gonna pay to connect to the district, and then there's gonna be an ongoing annual charge, and that covers the operation of the district. And then there's some net revenue beyond operations that we put into this fund for the rehabilitation and repair capital projects that come up over time. And so it does work.
The bottom line is construction slows down, revenue slows down, it could slow down the rate of capital project development
Right,
or require more borrowing.
but even without new connections, we still have the ongoing customers paying annual fees to maintain the existing infrastructure. If there's no new connections, there's no connection fees, but there's not that demand on the need to expand facilities, so it kind of works out. Great,
Can I just ask a very quick question?
yes, please.
If an existing structure that's not a residential at this time is converted into an ADU that's larger than 500 square feet, so let's say you have a shed, just as an example. You want to convert it into an ADU, it's more than 500 square feet, would they be charged a connection fee for that conversion?
I'm gonna direct that to staff, maybe Celeste.
Yeah.
So it's
I would think so.
did you catch the question?
Yes, so if you are transitioning non-living space or into living space, then yes, you will.
Got it. You might want to, yeah. I think the legislation speaks to that, so that might be worth looking into on conversions and capacity fees for conversions.
And the ADU legislation seems to change every 6 months.
Yeah, there's
It's challenging.
stuff that is, yeah. I know, there's new stuff yeah, I know. It's a lot.
When that happens, we update our ordinances for those.
Great, okay, at this point, I will open it up for a motion on adopting ordinance 1/2024.
That moved to be approved ordinance 1/2024, which would adjust the agency sewer connection charges, as outlined in the staff report.
I will second that.
A motion by Wilkins and a second by Wilson. And as an ordinance, I believe roll call is required. Okay,
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
Director Cox,
yes.
Director Wilkins,
Yes.
and President Tressi.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay, thank you, public, for your comments. We're gonna move now to item 3, which is a public hearing related to the board's consideration of adopting resolutions to put the annual user fees on the county tax rolls. And there's 3 counties, I believe, that we do this with. Is there a staff report?
There is, Liz is up again.
I'm gonna get my stuff in today. Here I am again. Thanks for welcoming me back. This happens, to my understanding, since this is my first year learning about all of this here. This happens every single June. We need to go ahead and put the annual sewer service charges on the tax roll. So all of the documents that were in your packet is us doing that exact thing. There will be a piece that comes in July, but this is the piece we need to take care of before the fiscal year begins.
So again, kind of logistically, we have a public hearing that we open to get comments from the public. And then there's a follow-up item where we'll consider adopting those resolutions to actually put them on there. So I don't know that I said it, but I will open the public hearing now that we've had a staff report. Any public comment on the proposed resolutions to collect user fees on the tax roll? Hearing nothing, any board comments on this item?
It's standard procedure.
Yep. We've been doing this for a number of years. I will now close the public hearing and move to item 4, which is a approval of resolutions 1, 2, and 3-2024 to collect these user fees for sewer service charges. Yes.
Director Trustin, as a reminder, we had a question last year about whether these could be adopted by one motion or required separate motions. They can be adopted by one motion.
Okay.
If that's the pleasure of the board.
So I think we'll do that with a single motion to adopt the 3 resolutions to collect user fees or what we call sewer service charges on the county tax rolls for Nevada, Placer, and Eldorado counties.
So move.
We have a motion by
I'll second it.
Fox, seconded by Director Smeltzer. Any additional comments? Hearing none, we will do a roll call.
Sorry. Roll call?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm everything here from the other here. Roll call for Director Wilson,
Yes.
Director Smeltzer,
Yes.
Director Cox.
Yes.
Director Wilkins
Yes.
and President Tresson.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay. On to item 5, which is an update on the class and compensation study with Gallagher Consulting.
Good morning again, President Tucson and directors. Just wanted to give a quick update on the class and comp study. Gallagher continues to work diligently on our class and comp study. They have provided draft deliverables as expected and in a timely manner. Draft compensation data has been received and a management review is in progress. The data has been shared preliminarily with the observation group. And several questions resulted from that meeting, working with Gallagher on getting the answers to those questions. Draft classification descriptions have also been received and management review has already taken place. Gallagher is making a few minor adjustments to the classification descriptions, and I'm expecting those back by the end of this week. At that time, we will distribute them among the affected staff. We expect to share the compensation data with all staff at a meeting during the 3rd week in July. And the reason for the 3rd week in July is that we have several staff vacations upcoming, and that seems to be the earliest time that we can probably all get together. And for the same reason, we expect to bring those classification and compensation data pieces back to the board for your review at the August Board of Directors meeting. Any questions in the meantime?
You're not seeking any input from us at this point, just updating us on the process. Okay. Any questions for Vicky? Hearing none, thank you for the update. Close item 5. And move to item 6, which is the review and approval of the May finances.
I'm not gonna take it personal, that everyone's getting up a meeting, but talk to the rest of the meeting, but that's okay. Good morning again, I'm back to talk about the May financials. So the first thing you should have noticed in your packet this month is it looks a little different. There's a lot more words before the numbers show up. So one approach that we tried to take is to add some more robust, used to have footnotes at the very bottom of the Fund 10 report down here. What I tried to do is take some of that information, make it a little more meaningful and put it in a front end staff report, as I call it. I would like to continue to mature that report as we go through FY 25. I think it's important that we look at projections, not just budget to actual, but what we think is also going to happen. And so I'd like to include some of that information in that staff report as well going forward. So that was the big change for this. Let's talk about the numbers. So in looking at Fund 10, our general fund, the biggest thing that you should have noticed is we're in the revenue. We received our teeter payment as we anticipated. On the expenditure side, I have a follow-up. A question was asked at Finance Committee regarding contractual services, because we're 90+% of the way through the year, and those services are only about 73% billed. It's related to chemicals, so I misspoke at the meeting and I thought that. But it has to do with treatment and how we're doing it differently. So there was less need for chemicals this season, then there is still a chemical order. So you will see that number go up when we talk about it at Finance Committee and bring the results back here. But there was nothing missing, nothing wrong, just a different order of operations this time. That was pretty much the highlight for Fund 10. For Fund 2 and Fund 6, you also have information attached about project spending. I'd like to draw your attention to the 4th page of that packet, which is the combined cash statement. One thing I'd like to point out, and I'm teeing it up because the next item is gonna be the budget, is that Fund 10, if you look at the bottom, the very last line, you have $19.4 million, and last May there was 14.3. That big difference comes from one, the increased rates. We should see more money this year than last year, that's anticipated. But also, Fund 6 was not funded to the target balance for FY 24. And that's one of the reasons why you see a larger balance there and a smaller balance in Fund 6 when you look at the year-over-year change. That was also a comment from Finance Committee that I wanted to make sure I addressed. Before we take a look at the fund charts, are there any questions on the May results? I'll take that in silence that we can move on to the fund charts. Sometimes it stuns me when I see it too. So we've had these charts in here for a little while. Again, I'll remind you that the wastewater capital reserve does not start at 0. We zoomed in because that money had, the lines were on top of each other and we had the axis down at 0. So we drilled in a little bit more so that we could see some of those differences. So as we've been talking about Fund 2, that's the last 5-year history. It does display that not a lot of money has been spent from that fund the last 5 years, which is what we're talking about. Fund 6 is right below that. The emergency contingency fund balance, and then your general fund balance. The last thing I'll draw your attention to is the very last chart called total cash balances. This is where you can really see the increase to your rates displayed a little bit more. When we had a conversation about this at Finance Committee, that uptick for May for the blue line with a little asterisk on it is higher than the prior year. And that's what I would have expected to see based on what's been happening here. So those are your highlights for May financials. Questions or comments or points from the board?
Liz, when would we, if we end the year, we raised our service charges so that our Fund 10 balance is now higher. At what point do we take action to transfer some of those funds into Fund 6 or rehab capital fund?
That's a great question, and I'm gonna defer it to the next item because I'm gonna talk about it for the budget.
Okay.
But this would be the time that we would do it.
Okay.
When we talk about the next or the upcoming fiscal year budget, you wanna prepare the funds to take those expenditures. It's gonna be a little wild ride for FY 25, and we'll talk through that.
Okay.
But this would be the time to have that conversation when we're addressing the budget.
Again, we talk about these charts a lot during our finance committee meeting, and they really are helpful, getting these trends. Gives you a lot more confidence in where things are headed, so.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
Any questions for Liz on the charts?
We'll get my budget.
That's the end of the presentation, review and approval of the May financial results. We need a board motion to accept the finance report. Scott, how about
I so moved.
Scott moves, I will second. Any other comment, public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Accepting the finances for May?
Aye.
Great. And now we'll move into the budget. Proposed budget for fiscal year 25.
Good morning again. So let's talk today about the FY 25 budget. Some of the charts, most of the charts that were included in your packet should look familiar. They're the charts that go into the formally printed budget book once the budget is accepted. I have a few additional slides that I've added today to talk about to help support the numbers. What I would like to do is start at an executive level, talk a little bit about CIP and what the management team has done over the past few months to help refine that and define what's happening. Then we'll talk about our expenditures and our revenues. Sound like a plan? So overall, in its entirety, the FY 25 budget assumes $28.9 million in total revenues from all funds and $37.5 million in all fund expenditures. There's approximately $8.6 million in reserves that are anticipated to be needed to balance the budget. I will illustrate that when we get to the end of the presentation. First, we're going to talk about how we got to the numbers, and we'll talk about our fund balances and how we actually fund what's going on. So the biggest change for this budget is how we looked at capital spending. The managers got together several times to reprioritize the spending. So in your packet, there was a list of the projects. I didn't put it on the screen. It just becomes an eyesore and no one can really see it. So I'm referencing these two lists that were in your packet of the capital projects and the 5-year spend. So it might look a little different to you than it has in prior years. There's numbers assigned to it, 1, 2s, and 3s. What's this nonsense all about? Well, it's important to prioritize projects. Can't do all of them at one time, right? Just can't afford to do it because there's just not enough people to get it all done. So a priority 1 has been assigned to projects in either funds. Those projects are either approved by the board, are coming to the board in early FY 25, or are regulatory driven. I did miss that part on the staff report to add, so it's important to talk about that. Some projects that we get handed are out of our control. Regulations like to tell us what we need to take a look at. So those have been assigned priority 1. Priority 2 projects still need to be approved by the board, and funding will be identified in that fiscal impact, which is my favorite part of the report. You should be surprised by that, how we plan to fund the project when we bring it for approval. Priority 3 projects are also listed. There are a lot of projects that were listed in the initial master plan. They may be impacted by the alternative nutrient removal study that's happening right now, or some of these projects are just outside of the 5-year window. We're not going to talk about them right now. They're still in the 30-year plan, the 20-year plan, the 10-year plan that I have a giant spreadsheet to look at, but we really care about the next 5 years. Priority 3 has the lowest level of funding. Does everyone understand when I talk about the priorities and the definitions? Are there questions about that approach?
I appreciate the approach. I did have a question on the priority level. There's 2 numbers. There's the priority levels 1, 2, and 3 is the first number, but then you've got a, 1.1 and
Yeah.
2.1, and then there's a bunch of ones that all are 2.1, and then there's some that are jumped to 2.3. What is the second number?
The second number is really for internal tracking. It's which manager asked first. No, I'm just kidding. It just helps us internalize. When we look at all of the category 2 projects, it still was a very lofty list. So internally, we needed to organize how we were going to bring them to the board. If this project needed to happen before a different project, So you'll see some of those numbers there, especially when you get to the threes. There may be some projects that were identified as a 3.1. They're important projects, but they're outside of the 5-year window, so now they're not part of this conversation. So I tend to look at the first number sets the priority to have the conversation with the board and the public. The second number really helps internalize and helps us organize what's happening.
Thank you.
Other questions about the priorities? We will talk about capital spending in the latter half of this presentation in a consolidation, but before we leave these printed pages, any questions about the actual projects that were listed on here?
I appreciate the way you guys have organized. In the past, it's been just one long list, and this at least gives us the ability to focus on these, and I'm sure it was a lot of staff time went into developing these priorities, and so that's helpful for us.
And this isn't the last time we'll talk about it. We need to continue to refine it. And my personal goal is that we have a CIP booklet. We need to have more information on what the actual projects are. It should be in a consolidated place that we can all reference. So it's something that we're striving towards, and this really helped us take that big step to start that organization, but it's gonna take more time to continue to refine it, and we'll continue to keep you in the loop. Okay, let's take a look at the actual numbers. So this right here is an executive summary. It doesn't have any details. We don't like to give executives too many details, ask too many questions. Just kidding, all the details are there. But this lays out in a consolidated manner, what are we trying to spend, what money are we bringing in? It's a very easy snapshot, and it's a way to keep my brain right when I keep talking about all of these charts. Because at any one moment, I might just shout out the number 211. We'll see what happens. So, Fund 10, Fund 2, Fund 6, and Fund 7. Let's talk about what they are really quick. Fund 10 is the general fund. As our board president noted, it comes from our sewer service charges. I have to always say it very slow, so I make sure I say the right charge. Fund 2, sewer connection charges. Fund 6 is, I call it a byproduct of Fund 10. Rate money goes into Fund 10. We put it into Fund 6 as we need to spend it. It's our way of keeping capital away from operating. And Fund 7 is the good old emergency and contingency fund. It's great that you have it. And when we get in the latter part of the presentation, we're going to talk a little bit more about potential uses for it. Below the revenues are all of our expenditures. I will note that these totals for Fund 2 and Fund 6 also include the current debt payment that rolls through 2027. So before we take a look into the details, any questions on the executive summary roll-up, or can we get through the details?
This comes back to my previous question. So Fund 6 shows a revenue of $200,000, but do you consider the transfer of the net revenue from Fund 10 into Fund 6 as a revenue source or not?
I would consider it a revenue source, and we'll look at it later in the presentation, but it's not what I'm considering FY25 revenue. It's money you have in the bank, so we're gonna adjust the beginning balance, which is considered revenue to the fund. But when we're talking about this executive summary, what new money is going to come into the agency from July 1 to June 30? That money of transferring from Fund 10 to Fund 6 is already in the bank. Okay? I'm gonna pause there for 1 second. Like the sheet that I showed you all at Finance Committee, I've dissected into a few slides to make it more digestible, and that's how we're gonna wrap up to put all the pieces together. So I will talk about that and the moving pieces.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. Who doesn't love a good donut chart? You guys are getting to know me well. I love donut charts. It made me think about donuts. So this is just the sources and uses of fund. Where's your money coming from? Where is it going? One thing you will note on here is I consider reserve use. When I say we're going to use our beginning balance, there is a reserve use in your sources of funds. I don't think we've looked at it that way before, but it's important, 1, to deliver a balanced budget, and 2, to make sure we have the money in the bank to be able to do this. So this is just an easy graphic to show where the money comes from versus where it's going by funds.
And Liz, in the revenue estimations, do the staff assume that the connection fee was going to be adopted?
It did, and that's in the latter half of the year, so we assume that the construction season's May to September. So those, what we got for FY 24 happened earlier, I'm sorry, let me pause for a second. What's coming for FY 25 is gonna come on the back end. We're gonna start FY 25 in July, and we're already in the construction season. Those permits ideally have already been pulled. People aren't pulling permits as we're in the season. They'll come in January, February, March, April, to pull those permits. So it did assume that the fee was increased. Okay, then look at the next slide. So this is our total revenue. Again, I wanted to present the FY 24 budget. We have actuals as of May 31st. When we present the budget book, we will update this with actuals as of year end. But for me, it was important to look at what was known. So we have a comparative here from budget to budget in dollars and percents. Again, I did note here for our service charges, we had a Prop 218 notice that gave us the ability to raise to 18.5%. You guys took care of that already. And then we also increased the sewer connection charges by the 79.2 that we talked about earlier here in the meeting. Any questions on this chart? You will see that I will go through some of them quickly. This information consolidates in the beginning as well as the end, but the detail is provided in the middle in case there are specific questions. So let's take a look just at Fund 10. Fund 10 revenues are made up of sewer service charges, ad valorem, fund interest, other revenues, and temporary discharge permits. So you can see here everything that we assumed for the fiscal year. Questions about any of the assumptions?
I know that you're conservative on the interest piece.
I am. Again, I noted at finance committee that I am not generally an uptight person, but when it comes to delivering the budget or trying to gain how interest is going to go, I am a little more conservative. We did reach out to our financial advisors though, and did make some adjustments based on the comments at finance committee. So I had to increase the amount of it. It's still very, very reasonable based on the current investment strategies. Any other questions on the general fund before we move to the wastewater capital funds? Okay, next up. So we talked a lot about the wastewater capital fund revenues for the upcoming year already. So I will pause here. We did note how we made the assumptions as well as the assumption in growth per year is a 0.5% factor, which is equivalent to 211 EUs per year.
You know, I remember we've talked about this in the past. Over the last 5 years or so, how many on average EDUs, new EDUs we have connected to the agency?
I do not remember that number off the top of my head, but I want to say it's a little less than 200 because in the model, it goes up by 1 every year. The growth factor, so
Okay.
logic would dictate it goes back, but we can follow up and have the actuals for you.
Okay.
Let me just make a note. My phone friend is no longer on the phone.
My recollection was it was even higher than 211, and we're being conservative there.
I think it was
closer to
like
300, I think there was at one point, maybe we even had a 350.
There were years.
But it fluctuates a lot. There's a fair amount of
I
fluctuation.
think this is a conservative number, 230s down the line, but
Okay,
you know, let's.
okay.
Just a follow up on that. Okay, let's move to the next slide and take a look at the replacement, rehab, and upgrade fund 6. As we noted earlier in the presentation, the only way this fund gets money is if we have money in fund 10 to fund it or interest. So we did, this was a change from finance committee. I think I had only assumed 100,000. We increased it to 200,000 based on investment strategies and talking to the financial advisors. Hopefully I'll be wrong on that one and we'll blow it out of the water. Okay, let's take a look at the next slide. Emergency and contingency reserve fund. Again, same thing. This fund is only funded by interest. It does have a growing balance. We do have the opportunity to move that balance, but I want to wait and hold that conversation for the end. Before we leave revenues and start talking about expenditures, are there any questions on any of the revenue assumptions for FY 25? Okay. Taking a look at slide 9, that's our general fund expenditure summary. It does tend to get a little eye charty, so I'm glad that you guys have copies in front of you that you can take a look at. But this is all of Fund 10's expenditures categorized. This should look very familiar. It's what our financial statements look like every single month for the categories. And this is all departments. We'll take a little bit deeper look into the departments in the next few slides where I'll talk about some of the changes. But overall, the anticipated FY 25 budget is going to be $19.9-ish million.
Quick question on 4 lines up from the bottom, supplies, repairs and maintenance.
Sure.
Is that number lower because we achieved so much this year?
I will need to take a look at the departments. I believe part of that is driven by less supplies for the lab when we take a look at actual departments.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that was one of the larger drivers for it.
Yeah, I also have a question on this. It has to do
No,
with,
no.
the FY 24 budget
Sure.
versus. I think these are actuals as of 5/31 as opposed to estimated actuals as of the end of the year.
Correct.
And I understand that, estimating what the actual is gonna be at the end of the year is tricky. That would be useful information for me in the future,
Okay.
because so when I look at this, it's because it's only through the end of May, it's missing, a month's worth of expense information. It looks to me like we're expecting to be under budget in most categories, between actual this year and budgeted for this year. But I'm having to assume that because I'm not seeing, staff's estimate on it. And then the other question that comes to mind is like, assuming that's the case, like the salaries and wages being below budget, is that a result of vacancies?
Yes.
For the most part. Okay, thanks.
And I guess it'd be good to just get this out, the salaries and wages projection for the budget. We're in the midst of a comp study. What assumptions are made in terms of salaries and wages?
Absolutely none related to the class and comp study. There are several variables and any number I presented would be a shot in the dark. As they bring the class and comp study, I can bring back the salaries and wages benefit and overlay it and show you what the anticipated changes could be and the impacts to the overall budget. That was my intent, because again, any number that we put in there is just gonna be a guesstimate.
So that budget is based on the COLA that was adopted and potentially filling vacancies and step increases that might occur during the year.
Yes, and any vacation payouts or leave payable payouts that people are eligible for at the beginning of the year are also included in that line item.
On the employee benefits, which is the second largest Fund 10 kind of line item. A lot of that is our health benefit that we provide. Do you know what assumption was made in terms of the increase in our health premium? I know that's a calendar year adjustment, so it only affects 6 months of the budget, but you had to throw some factor in there. Do you remember what that was?
Percentage.
Did you get any information about medical insurance?
No, CalPERS generally will provide that sometime after July 1st.
Yeah, but
They-
I can say numbers of 10 to 15%.
Yeah, they did come out with their preliminary this last week, and then, I mean, the Platinum plan has got a 13 in change for Region 1 increase, so.
In the past, for retiree medical benefits, there has been reimbursement requested from the plan, and we are not gonna ask for that this year. So there will be an increase in total expenditure, where you see that $450,000 credit on the financials for FY 24. We will not receive that, or ask for that credit for this year, just based on the actuary information that we received for how the balance will end here. I want to go back and address the actual comments. I appreciate the feedback, thank you. I will admit that one is me. It is a little hard to project when you aren't newer to the agency, so there is 1/12 of all expenditures missing. Running some back of napkin math, I did anticipate that salaries and wages would come under. Second highest level position in the agency has been open for more than 6 months, so that is a large driver of it. Plus there were changes and other staff vacancies that helped add to that, so you will be under for that. We did consider that when we were building the FY 25 budget, so while we may not have displayed projected balances, we did take that into consideration where we could, and we have some known information. I will take a look at the specific medical line item, I have it on the computer, I can take a look at what.
Okay. And I'm surprised that the CERT, the trust fund for our retiree health actuarial indicated no recommended.
It has to do with the net OPEB liability, the expenditures, the deferred inflows and the deferred outflows. It becomes an accounting situation that we talk mostly about, but to be prudent and conservative, which I have noted that mostly I am, it made more sense to leave it in there. We can mature that conversation. We still have the ability to ask. If you come into information or we go back and find more information and want to change, we do still have the ability for that. It is not included in the budget.
Okay.
Okay. Also, I misspoke. Supplies is not down because of less lab supply. Thank you for the sideways look so that I would double check. But when we get into the departments, I will find why it's lower. Before we look by department, any questions in aggregate? Okay, let's take a look at general fund expenditure summary by department. As we get into the departments, I will note changes. There are different staff roll-ups from the prior years that are considered in the FY 25 budget. So let's take a look at some history. If you go to the next slide. I want to be able to show you just a little historical look by department for where budgets and actuals have landed. So you have 3 different charts here. The first chart for FY 24 is budget to actual, again, as of 5/31/2024. So it is missing that 1/12 assumption. For FY 23, because it is the only complete year that we have, the most recent complete year, we did budget to actuals. Again, budgets are in green and actuals are in blue, so you can see the comparative. For 21 and 22, I just wanted to show the actuals. Becomes less important what our assumptions were then, but I wanted to show the trend in the actuals for the dollar amounts by department. So let's take a look at slide 12 and talk about the administrative department. For FY 25, the administrative department is made up of the general manager, human resources, finance and admin staff, as well as safety staff. From budget to budget, there was a 26.5% increase in insurance. There are several categories that were increased 10 to 15%. We also added some insured items, so that's how you get to the 26.5% increase. Increases in insurance are happening everywhere. There's been some communication sent out so that maybe we can get some groups of general managers and finance people together so that we can start having these conversations and figuring out what we need to do to try to drive some of these costs down. One of the larger increases you'll see in this budget, as well as everyone's budget, is the additional investment in staff for training and conferences. We've all survived COVID, so we can all go back out and hang out with people again and get educated. As we continue to progress using new technology, using different approaches, we need to make sure that staff really understands. So I was happy to see that investment in staff.
Liz, back on the insurance item.
Yeah.
So the CSRMA insurance, a little over $500,000 is what we're budgeting for fiscal year 25. So is that insurance basically on the entire, all of our plant facilities? So if we have some kind of, like we had an earthquake, or if we had a wildfire that came through and took our buildings out, took part of our fleet out, is that what that's covering?
Yeah, it's all of the insurance programs we have, vehicles, facilities, some forms of cybersecurity, a tax, insurance, et cetera.
Okay,
Property liability, commercial crime and bonds, errors and omissions, those types of things. I don't know if it specifically covers earthquake, just because I know in California they get a little sketch when you say earthquake, but we can double check if you want to see if that one's in there.
The workers' comp is in that line item as well.
I would be curious about that, actually.
Okay.
What our coverages are. Yeah.
Why is there a decrease in utilities?
So some of the utilities were moved around a little bit. We moved them to some different departments. And so that has an effect of that. A net effect of it. You can also see that for the admin department, there is less supplies, repairs and maintenance budgeted here, so that's part of it, not the whole.
Yeah, and the reason I'm curious about the insurance is there seems to be a lot of movement in that industry and a lot more activity of excluding certain coverages.
Yes.
And just want to make sure we're clear as to what is and isn't covered. And whether we're comfortable with that.
Okay. Any other questions on the admin department before we move to operations? On the operations. Oh, I apologize, I misspoke. I did think that workers' comp was labeled there when I read my last email, but it is not. It's included in employee benefits. Thank you for speaking up and correcting me. Thanks for your patience. Sometimes I can't write as fast as my brain is going. And I just keep writing when you're in the level of that. Okay, let's take a look at the operations department. I think we're all on slide 13 together. So again, overall increase, 5% inflation is assumed for electricity, easy for me to say, heating, fuel, and diesel. It's embedded in utilities. There were chemical increases for multi-year contracts that we knew about, and adjustments for usage. There's additional supplies maintenance for facilities, operations, put into this budget. And again, that ongoing trend of additional investments in staff for training and conferences. Any specific questions on the operations department budget?
Biggest comments, I mean, the budget, again, is a good plan, but I want to say that PUD, I think, provides our electricity, and which is probably the majority of that utility thing. I believe they've got a double-digit rate increase for the next couple of years. And so, just some feedback. And I'm guessing that the types of training that the operations crew, which looks like the budget's higher than the admin crew, but for the salaries for the, we got 1/10 of the money in operations training that we do in the admin training. Maybe it's just the type of training that the operations staff ends up doing as opposed to, maybe it's not offsite conferences and hotels. But it's just want to make sure that there's plenty of the operators need their training too. And just a comment there.
Okay. I will note that in prior years too, the lab and operations work together, and as we look for FY25 engineering and all that will be together on the technical services. We will talk about this.
Yeah, and one thing I would be curious about, it probably doesn't need to be in the budget, but just what the breakdown is in our utility expenses.
Sure.
Between, I'm assuming power, water, telecommunications, internet, are probably the 4 or 5 that we've got out there.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, there we go.
Got it.
And I know we've talked about some of our capital projects, trying to get more use out of the methane that gets produced here, correct? Potentially to reduce some of those utility expenses long term.
Okay, moving on to slide 14, technical services department, again, made up of engineering and lab. Lab expenses are now included here. Lab staffing is assumed to be reduced by 1 because that position was repurposed to the IT department. You will see the opposite comment in the IT slide. Again, additional investment in staff and training, and I misspoke because we didn't have less supplies, we have additional supplies. I knew I wrote supplies for that slide, I just couldn't remember what I wrote. Specific questions for the technical services department.
Maybe a general question for Richard, just total across the budget in terms of new positions that are being contemplated, if any.
We are contemplating one new, admin assistant position. And it's continuing staff over.
I'm gonna add to that comment because Richard also said, you just didn't hear it, that there's also the potential for a part-time position in the lab. The job description, I believe, is part of class and comp, and we talked about it as part of that. So when we know the full effect of on the labor budget for class and comp, I will overlay the impact of that as well as the incremental staffing positions that we're asking for. They are not currently included in the budget because we needed to see the priority of dealing with the class and comp study first.
And just to comment on that, position, we're chasing after some type of internship program instead of taking on a long-term liability.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other technical services department questions? I'd like to know if you guys have survived the halfway mark. It won't get any faster. I'd like to tell you it will, but it won't. So let's talk about the maintenance department. Includes maintenance, IT, and the warehouse. Again, as I mentioned, they took a staff member from the lab or a headcount position, and it was added to the IT staff. We did do some consolidation, so some of those moves that we were talking about, we put all of the computer software and cell phone expenses from all the departments in this department budget because they tend to manage all of those things. So they can manage the budget for us. Thank you. This is where you see a reduction. They had a 991.5 FY 24 supply repair maintenance budget, and the request for FY 25 is only 887.5. So there's the other rest of your driver. Wrong slide. And again, they're also investing in staff for training and conferences. Questions specifically about the maintenance department? All right, let's give you one more eye chart for the next slide. This is a consolidation to show you for Fund 10 the revenue assumptions coming in and the expenditures coming back out, so that you can tell if we have an operating income or loss. And in just looking at these, you can see that we're in the money. We are anticipating spending less money on operations than we're actually bringing in. This is good because we have not talked about the money we need to put in Fund 6. That's coming. Before we leave the general fund, are there any questions on the expenditures or the revenues for Fund 10? Let's go to slide 17. This is where I said we would revisit that capital conversation, but it would be consolidated. Because if I put that chart on here, it's an eye chart not even I can see on my printed page while I have my notes. So the attempt here is to show you again a consolidation. Here's the revenue that the wastewater capital reserve fund is bringing in. So for FY 25, it's that $2.6 million that's made up of connection fees and fund interest. Our expenditures are laid out by priority. It was important to me to lay them out by priority so that you all understand that the primary expenditures are anticipated to be that 1.9 million. We can find some more money in more time, we'll move down to the next level priority and the next level priority. There's also a debt payment that needs to be made in FY 25 out of this fund. So total fund expenditures for Fund 2 will be $4.5 million. And again, it has a beginning balance. So it's not concerning that we're spending more in the fiscal year than we're actually bringing into the fund. And I will show you that in the next couple of slides. Questions about Fund 2? Okay. Same slide, different fund. If we move to slide 18. This is Fund 6, replacement, rehab, and upgrade fund summary. Same concept. As I noted earlier, the only money that comes into this fund on its own is fund interest. So we're anticipating about $200,000 coming in. Our priority one expenditures for Fund 6 are $10.9 million. And you can see priority 2 and 3 there. As well as the debt payment that needs to be made comes to a total of 12 point, I mean, we could call it 13 if we're rounding, right? $13 million. Aside from the question of how are we gonna fund that, are there any questions on this slide? I will answer that question in the next slide. I keep teasing you. Oh, no, it's 2 more slides. The last slide to wrap up, before we talk about fund balances, are just that. What do we think we're gonna have in the bank? So, as of 5/31, the first column shows what our actual balances were. We know we have to put money aside for the upcoming debt payment. We know we have some anticipated June expenses. So this is one way where I try to account for the fact that the expenditures are only through May. I just did it in aggregate. I didn't do it by category. So our total anticipated expenditures for June, including the debt payment, are in that second to last column, and they total about $4.5 million. And then you can see our ending balances. So overall, we're in the good. We have $40 million in cash. It's a decent story. When we start to dissect it, is where we notice that we have some work to do. So let's talk about the work that we need to do. You go to slide 20. Okay, so a lot going on this slide. So the very top line that's in green, I use specific colors so that it would be easy to orient everyone with what we're talking about. The green information came from the slide that we just looked at. It's that anticipated ending balance column. The blue information below it is a conversation about what our target balances need to be. So let's just take a look at Fund 10. We're estimating that we'll have about $17.9 million at the end of the year. In order to meet our reserve target, which is 60% of Fund 10 plus the UAL payment, we need to have about $12.5 million in there. If you do the math, 17 minus the 12, you come to $5.3 million. That $5.3 million is available from Fund 10 to be deposited into Fund 6. So as we talked earlier, there's the revenue into Fund 6. Now, if you remember, I told you we were going to spend $13 million, and this is not $13 million. So let's talk about how we get there in just a couple of seconds. Fund 2 is the next column. The Fund 2 target balance is 50% of the 5-year capital plan. It's this year plus the current 4 year or the future 4 years. It's $9.7 million that we need to have in that fund. We have 17.2. We're fine for Fund 2. For Fund 6, I laid out a couple of numbers, because if you take a look at the first one, following the current policy, where you have to have 50 years of the 5-year CIP, we need to deposit almost $30 million. We do not have $30 million to put into this fund. If you look at only doing this target balance for only priority 1 projects, it's a little more digestible number. It's $13.6 million. If we were to look at funding priority 1 and 2, for this target balance, it would be $19.2 million. The reason why there's a box around the 13.6 is that is my recommendation. It attempts to get us to our target balance. It does not meet it. But what it does do is ensure that we have enough money for FY25. So remember a couple slides back where in Fund 10, I told you all that you have like $25 million coming in and you're only going to spend like $19.9 million of it-ish. You're going to make money in FY25 is the point of that comment. So if you move to slide 21, well, you'll notice I got rid of the other funds. We're going to focus the rest of this conversation right now on Fund 10 and Fund 6. So the first 2 lines are from the prior slide, where Fund 10 has the $17.9 million and it has the 5.4 available to transfer from. If we transfer that money to Fund 6 and we add it to the anticipated beginning balance of about $750,000, that takes us to a Fund 6 beginning balance of $6.1 million. Well, enough to start the year. It's about half of what we intend to spend for the fiscal year. So the target I'm recommending is the 13.6. In order to meet that 13.6, we need an additional $7.5 million in the year to fund it. If we only want to make sure that we have enough money for the fiscal year, then we need $6.9 million. That's the approach that I took for the next few slides. Before we move to the next slide and start to put another layer on top of this, does everyone understand what we're talking about with the target balances and how we've gotten to the beginning balance for FY 25? Are there questions about how we got there or the numbers?
I understand the numbers. I also understand they're based on certain assumptions on the rate of expenditure on capital projects,
Yeah.
which may or may not actually occur.
Spoken like an accountant.
So these fund transfers, I understand that there's a certain amount that would be appropriate to transfer at the beginning of the year, but would these occur more real time as necessary?
Yes, let's get to the next slide.
Okay.
Thanks for that tee up. It was like we planned it.
Okay.
Take a look at the next slide. So that's exactly what I'm recommending. I've really consolidated this slide. So line 1, 2, and 3 are the same lines that we had in the last prior slide. No new information. What I slipped in there is your total revenues for Fund 10 and Fund 6 and your total expenditures to show you again that Fund 10 is earning 25.9 and we're spending 19.8. Guess what? The rate model's working. We assumed we would need money for capital and we have it. We just won't have it until later in the year. So my recommendation would be to take the approach of mid to end of year transfers from Fund 10 to Fund 6. And we need to consider two things. One, how much money is in Fund 10? And two, how much actual spending are we doing out of Fund 6? How much have we actually done? Not necessarily how much has been billed, but what has been done and we have to actually pay for. Bills don't always come at the very, the end of the month. Sometimes they take 2 or 3 months to come. So it's a conversation that needs to be ongoing with the board, and some type of presentation similar to this needs to come back on the regular. I would recommend quarterly. You all look at the financial statements monthly. So if something starts to get off, we have the opportunity when it's not that quarterly update to talk about it. But I really think that we need to look at doing some quarterly updates and recommendations for the board. So in looking at the numbers, I believe we will have $6.9 million left at the end of the year that we could transfer into Fund 6. Should the spending occur the way that we anticipated, should all the projects go the way that we planned, we would still have money left at the end of the year. But here's the watch out. And we talked about this watch out before, and I will illustrate that on the next slide. But come 6/30/25, you're going to be under your Fund's 10 target balance. I can't imagine that the FY 26 budget will be less than the FY 25 budget. And if our current target balance is 12 million, 13 million, we only have 11.6 left. But you should have noticed, we haven't talked about the emergency reserve fund. That was on purpose. I didn't just forget about it or delete it off the slide. You have a cushion, right? These are anticipated. These are things that we think are going to happen. If this actually happens, there's still money in the emergency and contingency reserve fund that we could tap into, or we could consider using that allocation when we consider the target balance. Maybe not using it and transferring it, but we have the ability to say it's available. It's not restricted like Fund 2 is. All right, how's this conversation going? What do you guys think? Let's do a check-in. Are we all on the same page? Okay. Oh, there's a really big eye chart. This consolidates all of the slides that we just talked about. At the very top, it takes the information for what our newly assumed beginning balances will be if we did that $5 million transfer. It's the detail that I closed out of the prior slide, as well as where we end the year at the bottom. But I would like us to go to the next slide to make a point. In April of 2024, I presented this amazing graph. It's my favorite graph. It might not be everyone's favorite graph, and that's okay, but it's the mountains and the bars. Let's remember that the mountains are spending and the bar is money. You want the bars to be higher than the mountains. When the mountains are higher than the bars, we have a concern. We're out of money. And just as when we took a look at this in April to talk about we have a need to tighten up capital spending, which we've done, potentially look at other revenue sources, look at issuing debt, we're still in that danger period. None of this information that was presented today changes this chart. So we still have a lot of work to do in the next 12 to 18 months. The FY '26 budget is going to need some help, and we need to start looking at it now. That's why I think it's important that we do some quarterly looks, maybe some quarterly recommendations, and keep a tighter hold on what's happening. I just wanted to bring this up to remind you all, we can survive FY '25, we can probably survive FY '26, but if we do nothing, we will not survive FY '27. So before I move to the last slide, what questions do you have? I mean, it don't make sense in my brain, but I've been looking at it so long.
It was, you've been presenting us as part of the finances, financial results, those bar charts.
Yeah.
If we approve this budget and there's this transfer of funds out of Fund 10 into Fund 6, is that gonna show up kind of at the end of the year, or sort of the last month, a dip in June in Fund 10 and an increase in Fund 6, or does that happen in the next fiscal year? And, you see, I'm just wondering when will that show up in those charts?
It will show after June 30 for that year-end adjustment or the audit adjustment. Remember, we added those two in there to get from the ending balance of
Right.
June 30 to the beginning balance up here. So you'll see it adjust out here and it'll be reflected in the new beginning balance here. When we do it, I can illustrate that. And I would recommend, I'm not asking for the transfer now, it's not here as part of it, it's part of the conversation to help you all understand how to balance this budget when I say those terms. But as conservative as I am about cash, I don't know what your cash balance is going to be at June 30, because I don't know what's gonna happen in the next 2 weeks-ish. So I would say that we would come back in July to say, here's where we ended, here's the exact dollar amount that we can transfer.
So I have actually, it's a format question. So the information we received, we got us in the board packet, there was a summary of capital project activity. And then we received this PowerPoint that was part of the board packet and also part of this presentation. I'm assuming this is all going to be combined into a single budget document.
Yes, so it has been, it's my history, and so if that needs to be different, I will take that recommendation. But until the board approves it, it's not worth going through the 19 times I'm gonna reference a number and then continuing to update it. So it has been my practice to present the board the budget, the numbers, the actual math. Once it's done accepted, then we'll put together the actual budget book. And you will get a copy of it.
Okay, yeah, that is different than what I'm used to, which is usually getting a kind of a full roll-up draft of the budget book that we're reviewing as compared to this format. I think the same information's here, right?
Okay. And the numbers won't change. What you accept and approve as the budget, the tables will be the same. I took them from the presentation last year that the finance person did, as well as the budget book, so that they would be easy to lay in there. Some of the language in the book might change, just update, provide more information, really to help prepare us for upcoming financial statement changes if we have to refer back to the budget book. So there may be a little different look and feel, but all of the work is still there.
We had the same question in the finance committee, and Liz explained, she's gonna present all the tables, not in a ready to be printed bound format. And if we were good with that, then that would be consolidated into that format and given the amount of work. It might be a practice, but also it seems like a workload issue with all the things going on right now. So we, at the finance committee level, we're okay with them agendizing this for approval despite not having a nice cover sheet and, like we've seen in the past.
Yeah, and so I'm okay with that. I think from my perspective, I'd like to get a full copy of the budget once it's been fully compiled.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments, good budget stories? You guys have done the budget way more times here than I have, so you have a good tale to tell.
That was getting better.
We'll get it. We have mechanisms that we can talk about to survive. That'll be the next conversation.
So Liz, that's the end of your presentation.
That's it, that's all I have to
Okay.
say. I think I might even be done talking for this board meeting.
I'm not hearing any other questions from the board. I'll open it up to the public. If anybody has any questions.
I got a comment. Liz? Fantastic job, fantastic presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's
And
nice to
so-
see you in person.
The action is to approve the budget as presented, recognizing that it's gonna look different than the board packet. And that would be, I don't think there'd be a secondary approval, but it would be something that would get posted on the boards of the agency's website. So if we wanted to reference all the stuff, we could find it in a more kind of coherent package.
And once it's presented to you and you have it, if you have some edits that you would like to make, I don't see why we couldn't make them since you're approving the actual math for it now. And then in July, we'll bring the documents necessary to do the fund transfers and things like that.
Yeah, and so I'm fine with approving the numbers. I feel like what we're approving is kind of a PowerPoint presentation. We don't actually have the final document.
So the fiscal impact, I tried to write into way so that you could approve the dollar amount, so, my idea was that you would be approving that the budget is assuming $28.9 million in revenues. If you accept that that's what our budgeted revenues are, that we're spending let me try that again. $37.5 million in all fund expenditures. And that we're going to be using approximately $8.6 million in those reserves. So trying to keep it up at executive level.
So understanding that, I will entertain a motion to accept the budget.
Also, Luke?
Second?
Second,
Thank you.
any additional comments? Thank you, Liz. All in favor of accepting the budget? Aye. Approved. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
That ends item 7. I'm gonna, little apology, I'd like to move item 10. Kind of a little late, you guys, I appreciate your patience. This is the folks from Tucky Music. I thought earlier I would have moved you up, sooner in the agenda, so I appreciate your patience. If staff's all right, I'd like to move item 10, to get this item addressed and let them get on with the day. Okay, fantastic. So let's move to item 10. Is there a staff report?
I do have staff report and I'll make it quick. So, as many of you know, there's gonna be a music fest at the park down the street. We were approached by, the coordinators of the event, seeking a right of entry to allow parking along, Jorger. So simply asking for authorization to execute a right of entry with the organizers of the event, keeping in mind, concerns of the agency and protection of the agency as far as insurance requirements. So we're working with legal on that. We do have a draft that we just need to meet and finalize some of the details.
Do we have a map that would show the parameters? Because along Jordan, it's a pretty,
Yeah, that's one of the things we need to finalize. Originally, the request was shorter up to the bus barn. And being shared, I don't know if you want to have public comment and address that more, but they're working with the town fire department on what they're allowed to do, and that kind of affects the request on our side, so. I don't have a map of, and
yeah, that was the initial question I had was, it could be 2 miles long. And I don't know if that's something we need to entertain.
The current request that we have in place is from basically TSD to the TTSD bus barn.
On both sides.
Correct.
Being
And then
that-
for the town request, they're going to be parking, turning around the park so that the exodus when they leave is not parking the way you would drive along the road, but both sets of parking will be along, heading out shorter.
Being that it's over for a 2-day event, there's no overnight,
Correct, no overnight.
Yeah.
No overnight, no
and
camping.
how will that be enforced?
And we'll have not only signage, but we have security, 24 hours a day. Yeah.
And just for the benefit of the other board members, I work for the town who's involved with permitting this event. So I'll actually be the person who signs the permit for the event once they get, assuming they get all the pieces in place. One of those pieces is to make sure that all potentially affected property owners are aware of the event and have agreements in place that basically say they're okay with it. So I don't have any financial interest in the event, but I'm involved with it from another perspective as well.
You get a free ticket?
Have we talked to, Tykert Aggregates about their schedule that Friday and Saturday is? You go down this road and those big semis are running up and down fast and having folks walking along there. Is there any opportunity to have them not open on Saturday and close early on Friday so that you don't have that pedestrian and industrial truck traffic happening?
I have not talked to them, I mentioned that when we met originally, I don't know if you guys reached out to Tiger, to see what they were planning on running that weekend.
We did not reach out to Tiger, originally, because the festival, one, we didn't realize Saturday was even a flow of traffic for them on, working on a Saturday, so we can check and just make sure.
Yeah,
But, the festival starts in the afternoon, 3, like basically between 2 on would be when parking would probably start happening. So we could reach out to them to see if that's
On Friday and Saturday?
correct.
and I know that the contract, the agreement, indemnifies the agency, so God forbid something happens there, it's not gonna be on us, but I strongly recommend you communicate with them, and if there's any ability to get them to modify their schedule so that there's not that sort of truck on pedestrian, interaction, and they don't wanna run trucks up and down. So certainly not on Saturday if it starts earlier during their business time, would be a good idea,
It's afternoon, evening events on both days.
right?
So going back to one of the earlier comments. It sounded like the cars would park turned around on both sides of the road to egress the,
Correct.
how is the turnaround gonna work? I see a massive traffic jam somewhere.
Well, there's only so many spaces along there anyway, and then at some point you're blocking it off completely and having people go to our other offsite parking areas that we'll have. So it won't, we will be having people stationed along the order to stop additional traffic from coming in as soon as we reach that section down to TTUSD.
So I could actually speak to that.
Okay.
Just from my role on the other side of it. So what we would anticipate is from the town side and the town police department, communication is that the loading of the event is going to be, I'll say more incremental, because it starts in the afternoon and goes through 10 o'clock. So it's more of a, I don't want to call it a trickle in, but it's not like everyone's showing up at once.
It's not like a traditional concert thing.
I think the egress will be. So, it's, you got the big band at the end of the night when most of the people are there. So the thinking was that there's probably less of a heavy inflow of traffic all at once as the event is loaded, during the day. That would be a better time for vehicles to be turning around than when the event gets completed and then you've got everyone leaving at 10 o'clock, trying to turn the vehicles around on the road. We think that would be a much more kind of impactful time period for all that to occur.
Do you have any estimate on the number of cars and people?
We do, on that particular stretch of the road, it's actually been reduced greatly. Originally, we had talked about doing it all the way to the end of the road, and then when the town came back and asked us to disperse parking, so we have parking at, and shuttle, so we have parking at the high school, we have parking at the community center, 267, and then, we have parking at the rodeo grounds. And then we're also encouraging bike, usage.
We love parking at the airport.
And the airport, we've, secured that same parking as for the, air show. So we're working with them on their same,
So that.
program, and so it's, and so the parking is limited on that side. We've actually talked about loading that in later to, not have people show up and have it, not have parking and then have to go find parking, you know, a half an hour across town. So, we can actually, we have the plan that has the numbers on it. We can send you the updated numbers. I mean, we're talking, if I'm going on estimates, it's somewhere around 150 units. It's not like 500 units, of cars down there.
So it'd be like the East Shore of Tahoe when you go over to.
Well, a little slow going out, yeah.
And I do have another concern with this is the influx of the people. I'm still not sure how many people you're expecting to attend, but I think there's and I think Dale, from a fire perspective, is there any mitigation? I mean, will there be
The
fire
fire
trucks
department has a special
stationed?
permit process for any special events, and we followed all of their process.
Well, I'm still concerned about the, overnight aspect. Will your security be protecting this land down this way? Cause we have people camp overnight and stuff. That's a big concern.
Yeah.
Campfires and nonsense.
Well, when we talked with Richard about some of your offshoot dirt roads, you know, we can certainly block those, whether that's with an actual barricade or with security people or something like that. So
I'd
that's,
like to see something like
that's
that.
very possible to do.
So Richard, again, what is the action that's being requested at this point?
For approval for me to execute a right of entry with the promoters of the event, taking in consideration comments received today. As I work with them, my approach is gonna be looking at actually blocking the road off and closing the road for access. So that would prohibit people from driving further down and finding those offshoots, but I haven't had a chance to discuss that with the town or with the promoters
Are you
yet.
talking about just Butterfield Drive off Jorger or Jorger beyond?
Beyond where the park at is actually barricaded.
So Georgia itself, after Tiger closes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
In my experience with Tiger, is a lot of times they don't know their schedule until a week ahead of time, because it's based on contractor demand.
It'd be great to reach out to them and we'll see if there's some way to avoid that conflict. And assuming you have that, I'll just double check that legal counsel has reviewed the right of entry and insurance requirements and indemnification. Feel protects the agency.
Yes, we know.
Okay. Did you guys hear that? I just asked Andrew to make sure that legal reviewed the agreement to make sure that the indemnification insurance clauses were protective of the agency. He confirmed that. Okay.
And my understanding is the event organizers are entering into similar agreements with the rec department, with TSD, and with the airport district.
Right.
In
And so
terms of making sure that the way that the spillover parking from the event is happening on those properties or on park property, that it's being well managed.
Right. Great. Any other questions from the board? Anything else, you guys?
No, I was just smiling over an issue that we had at the Olympic Valley Public Service District several years ago, kind of the same thing. It was a Grateful Dead concert, and let me tell you something. That turned out to be a real fiasco. Because it was, I mean, there was not just several thousand, there was 100,000 people showed up for that event, and there was just not enough bathroom stalls and not enough parking and not enough this and not enough that. It was pretty amazing event.
Did you get free?
And that's what I was going on about the overnight parking. And
Yeah.
they came to Alpine Meadows even.
That's not on the line though.
That's not on the
All
line.
right.
They're playing at the Sphere right now, so I can't,
And Scott, I apologize, we would have brought a full presentation. We've done a full presentation for TSD, we did a full presentation for the town, so I apologize, we thought we were more a little bit consent calendar than full presentation, so we have stuff like that prepared, so
Yeah,
I apologize.
I want to reiterate, my concern is, I think from what I know, which is not that much, I think events like this are really good for the community. I'm looking at the dates in August and 9th. I used to be a wildland firefighter 40 years ago. And things are gonna be very dry and brittle here. And that's just one of my big concerns, is that people going to music events tend to enjoy themselves. And it makes me nervous. So I would love to see what the fire department has put in place. And Dan, you might be able to help me out here. Do you feel comfortable with the fire departments?
Yeah, they have to sign off on, they would need to sign off on this event and the public safety plan associated with it as a part of their, before the event.
And just to clarify, this is a family event, not the dead.
The dead was a family event.
Well,
Over by 10, you know, we're normally trying to keep, you know, children under 5 are free, you know, all of our kids are coming, their kids' friends are coming, so, you know, we're.
it is meant to be for locals, to invite our community to be able to see concerts that you would normally have to go to Reno or South Lake Tahoe or Sacramento for, and be able to do it in a cost-effective way. That's why we did a locals ticket for, $90. I mean, it's not $250 what you would pay at South Lake. So for us, we really are super protective of our home. We live here, we're community members. We want to walk around proud of the event and proud of the result of the event. So we're taking every extra measure you can imagine, because this is our home. And we want to make sure that it goes off to everyone around us flawless, although we'll be on the inside managing all the details, but like that it just went the way that it was planned. So to Jamie's point, we would have been here last fall as we started, like not a normal promoter. Normal promoters come in weeks and a couple of months before. We actually started with the town last summer. And so for us, we apologize for not having had that understanding of needing to come to the board. We did start these conversations with your teams very early so that we were, making sure we were being respectful of the property and everything that we need to do to make sure that this goes off with just it being a great event.
Other board questions? I saw, Ed, you had something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the conversation. I wasn't here for this particular item, but I thought I'd stick around. Kat has a lot of experience working with these ladies, with Stacy and Jamie. And so does our events manager. We know them to be absolute professionals. When they work on something, everything they do is with class and quality. And this event would certainly add to the economy. And I think also add to the quality of life for residents here in Truckee. So having said that, as Kat's executive director and speaking for 445 member companies, we 100% support them and this event. And I wouldn't have any reservation or worry about entering into an agreement with them. Thank you.
Thank you.
We paid him with some free tickets.
It wasn't enough. It's really good one.
Any other question or discussions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to authorize the general manager to enter into the right-of-way agreement with the event promoters for the Truckee Music.
So moved.
Moved by Cox. Second,
I'll second it.
seconded by
Absolutely.
Wilson.
Yes.
Great. Any additional comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
I'm going to abstain.
Wilkins abstain. Great.
Thank you guys very
Thanks
much.
for your patience. I'm glad you learned something.
We do also offer having a community booth out there, just so you guys know. So if there's things you want to talk about that are important to our community, we are doing some things. So just
Yeah.
please,
Very much appreciated.
yeah, we're happy to do that. This is about our families that live here.
Is there a website I can look at to see who's playing?
Yeah, TruckieMusicFest.com.
Okay,
And I can tell you, Friday night is Kip Moore, Lady Antebellum, and 1,000 Horses, and Saturday is Sublime with Bradley Newell's
His son?
son, Scott Manning, so number 5 on their tour here, and then G Love and Special Sauce, and we have a local band that we just signed called The Exchange, which is actually someone that went to school and grew up here in Truckee that will be opening for them. So it's a really big opportunity for them. Please come see us and
Thank you.
enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for bringing us up.
With-
Thank you.
We'll move on here to back to item 8, which is seeking approval of resolution 424, establishing the appropriations limit for fiscal year 25.
You're up again. No, I thought we were done.
I thought you guys were done hearing my voice, I guess not. Good morning. It is still morning. We have not progressed to afternoon yet. So congratulations for getting through all of those agenda items before the noon hour. This one, I believe, is also standard routine that comes to you all every June. I will note that the staff report front end that is associated with this resolution tells you that it is resolution 5, 2024. It is not. It is 4, 2024. The 5 and the 4 real close on the keyboard, that little fat finger there. There is no presentation. For this one. But the appropriations limit has been calculated for this fiscal year, $4.3 million based on the allowable increases, and the calculation was also included with it, as we are supposed to do, and it is before you for consideration.
So I did have a question about the actual tax proceeds, which seem to be higher than that are subject to the appropriations limit, and what, if any, how does that work?
Yeah, and I'm happy to help with this one.
I'm happy to phone a friend. Would you like the podium?
This is my first GAN limit question, so I'm gonna take a shot at it, but I'm also gonna ask my colleague, Doc Horowitz, for a little bit of assistance, because this item is routine, and so we don't normally get questions on it, but it's a good one, Director Preston. So, your GAN limit is your appropriations limit for your property tax revenue. Has no application to your fees or connection charges or other sources of revenue. It's applying solely to your ad valorem property tax revenue that you get for the county. Your GAN limit for this year is calculated to be about $4.2 million. Your expected property tax revenue, $5 million. And that's, I believe that's your question, Director Preston. How can the tax revenue that you're receiving be more than the amount that you're allowed to spend under your GAN limit? The answer is, your GAN limit doesn't apply to all of your spending of your property tax revenue. There are a couple notable exceptions, with one of them being qualified capital outlay projects, which are defined by statute to mean projects with a useful life of 10+ years, costing over $100,000. If you look back at the budget that you just approved, you have many projects in the next fiscal year which will exceed that $700,000 delta. Some portion of which will need to be funded with that property tax revenue in order to stay under your GAN limit. So there's a little bit of accounting that's going to be involved, but it's very doable to respect that GAN limit, $4.2 million appropriation limit through your accounting process.
I will also piggyback on that.
Okay.
This is also reviewed by the auditor every fiscal year as well, and they have to report it as well, so it is something that is launched. Thank you.
Great.
Now I'm done.
Good. Motion to approve the resolution. So moved. Seconded. And seeing no other questions from the audience, we'll take a roll call on this resolution. Michelle?
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Director Smeltzer,
Yes.
Director Cox,
Yes.
Director Wilkins,
Yes.
and President Tressi.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Item 9, approval to reject all bids for the procurement of sodium hypochlorite.
Morning, board directors. Peak Operations Manager. I just want to bring this agenda item to you today so that we could move forward with the appropriation of sodium chloride. So we went out to bid, just a little background. Last year we went out for, if you remember, we went out for multi-year bids on most of the chemicals, which was a 3-year contract. We only did a 1-year bid on sodium hypochlorite because we were still in testing phases of that chemical. Now that we've seen that it's, gonna be with us for a while, we went to a multi-year contract. But the bids that we got back in, it wasn't clear for the multiple year. It was just one bid for one, it looked like more for 1 year. So we're looking to reject all bids and fix our documentation on our end and resubmit that and have those bids come back in for a multiple year, which would be 2 years to get us in line with the other contracts, put us at the 3-year mark, and then we'll do all the contracts again, moving forward, whether it be at that point, single year or multiple year, depending on what the climate is at that time. So we're asking you, the management and staff are asking you to accept rejecting all current formal bids so that we can go out for a new formal bid.
You guys expect to be back in July for that?
We're gonna push it to hopefully get it back in July, so it won't be July 1st, but it'll be at least July
board meeting.
yeah.
There's no interruption in supply or anything?
No interruptions.
Great. Any other questions for the board? Entertain public comments?
Do you anticipate the rates coming down at all with the new bid for 2 years?
I don't anticipate it's gonna be much of a difference, but it'll be clear from year to year if there's an increase for the second year or if it's gonna stay flat. We expected the chemical companies would have provided that information to us, it was a multi-year, but none of the others provided that, so we just want to make sure it's clear that if there is increases through the multiple year contract, that they denote that, so.
Just enough to additionally, since we're going back out, I asked our purchasing agent to contact all the other agencies in the area that use sodium hypochlorite, like TDPV, and one out of City, to see if there's any interest in piggybacking on to our contract, and hurry to negotiate the better pricing.
Great.
Nice. Board, anybody looking for a motion to reject the bids?
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
I will second.
great. Anything else? If not, we'll. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. See you in July.
Thanks, Mike. Think you're back up, perhaps. We're moving on to management team reports.
Okay. Morning, Board of Directors again. Operations report for the month. All plant waste discharge requirements were met. The plant performed well through the month. We had a few public relations plant tours. We had some other agencies come in and some educational with some kids coming in through the school, which I believe Jason's also gonna speak to. And he has some pictures. Cleaned and inspected the centrifuge feed tank and the centrate tanks. The removal of the stored sulfuric acid that we've had on site for quite some time. For the old process of ion exchange, we've removed that chemical from the plant. And are in the process of cleaning out the old storage tank, and so we won't have that on site anymore. And operation staff participated in the trucking day. And let's see, we had 4 completed work orders, 3 pending. You want to go to the pictures? So this is just the centrate feed tank. The before pictures, before we cleaned it. We have after pictures.
I only have the before.
Okay, it's cleaner than that after that. If my word for it. Any questions on the operations department report?
Good job, Mike. Thank you. Some complaints? Move on to maintenance.
Good morning, everyone. So as you can see from the project support list, it's quite an extensive, list. Here we have the sodium hypochlorite project, warehouse inventory, server upgrade, digestion improvements, nutrient removal, front gate, and SCADA server replacement project. Quite a list. Staff were predominantly allocated towards these projects throughout the month. So as you'll see from the work order numbers later in the report, that did have an impact to our work order numbers. We did install touchless restroom faucets, if you notice in the restrooms. We did also install some bollards and chains to limit access to the well sites, or one of the well sites anyways. And we upgraded the primary sludge, or a primary sludge pump to CPEX, as previously approved by board. We still have a couple more we gotta do, as we continue that. We did attend some heavy lifting, or heavy equipment training for loader, skid steer, and aerial boom lift. That included our new loader and new skid steer, so there's a couple of pictures on the board packet for that. We completed our independent semi-annual TRI flow validation through USQ. And we attended the Central Square Engage Conference for our CMMS system. We also worked with TSD to provide a demonstration for our Lucity system. And we are also upgrading our network switches and fiber interconnects throughout the month. We have some more work to do on that, but we're nearing completion. We still do have 2 open recruitments on the electrical instrumentation side. However, we've made 2 offers, assuming that we complete that process. We're hoping to get 2 new staff members in the next month. We still have 1 more opening on the IT side. We have an interview this week, or a second interview this week, so that process is ongoing. And work orders, as you can see, did drop off a little bit month over month, based on the project allocations of staff. So, and on the pictures, there's that bright, shiny new loader right there. So everybody loves it. It's a great piece of equipment, but we've got some training. We worked with our safety department to get that coordinated, and in the upper right-hand corners are images. There you see on the left our sodium hypochlorite project. One of our staff members who recently retired, Dean Haynes. Just a quick note on him. He retired during the month. He had been with us for 7 years and 9 months. Started with us in 2016. We progressed through the grades, eventually got his grade 4 in 2020. He did a lot of good work for us, so I just wanted to publicly acknowledge his hard work for us, and there he is in the picture. On the right there, you can see the completed sodium hypochlorite project, electrical, and the pump skid on the right, kind of in the back there, the little black skid, and some of the instrumentation that's hung on the wall with remote I/O panel.
That's all in-house work.
Yeah, it's all in-house. As you can see, there's the remote I/O panel on the left-hand side. Our E&I supervisor built that in-house, so did an excellent job on that. And that's also our E&I supervisor on the right, filling in for our loss of staff over the past month, doing some of the sinks and routine PMs. And that is the bollard and chain for one of our well sites out there. That is also a shared site. We do need to provide access to TDPUD, so they also have a lock on the chain. I think that's it. Sure.
Thanks, Paul. Any questions for maintenance department? No? Great work. Thank you. Jason.
Good morning, board. So here is the explanation behind all the expenditures in Fund 6, basically. So as we kind of get deeper into these, if you guys have more in-depth questions, we're happy to answer. But sodium hypochlorite on our end of it is, we're kind of cleaning up things at this point. We have the manufacturer of the tanks out to do kind of a final install check, make sure that they can continue to warranty it, that we've done everything we had. Operations staff and maintenance staff did an amazing job. So passed with flying colors, no concerns. Digestion improvements project, we are doing data assessment still, and we're looking at things like the digester gas production numbers, the capacity, And we're starting to look at some of the potential reclassification of some of the spaces to meet, safety compliance requirements. The TRI Alpine Meadows, Olympic Valley South portion of the TRI that we have identified needs to be rehabbed, several river crossings. This says that we're doing the initial survey work, but I got word yesterday afternoon that we actually completed the initial survey work. We've identified no new environmental concerns or project concerns that would lead us to believe there's any permitting issues that we're gonna run into. So everything's running well there. We're also beginning the initial phases of public outreach, speaking to the concerned agencies. Spoke with Tahoe City already, started that initial conversation. So as we get closer to the project, that net is gonna broaden and we're gonna communicate to a larger group of people. We're projecting being completed with design sometime next summer and moving directly to construction in September 25, hopefully to align some of the lower flows that we see in that area and lower usage of some of the facilities. We are moving ahead through with the nutrient removal alternative study. We've had several meetings. We just had a really concentrated workshop with Rollo to discuss the condition of the current facilities, to go over some of the assumptions that were made in the master plan, to refine some of those assumptions. And we're taking a really hard cut right now at some of what COVID and all of those things have done to our cost assumptions from master plan projects, and hopefully refine that to the point where we can kind of use it as our foundation. We are also in the process of getting scope and feed from Jacobs, excuse me, I was gonna say CH2 Hill, from Jacobs to get a fate and transport study done, and that was a request from the Regional Water Quality Control Board, that it had been a very long time since we had looked at the flows of water through the disposal fields and their impacts on potential receiving waters. And there's been some new designations on both the Truckee and the Martis River as far as being impacted for certain constituents. So the board has requested that we do what's called a fate and transport study. We are going to use a two-phased approach with this study, where we're going to take information we have available to us now that we have been collecting over the last several decades, and we're going to run it through some modeling and see what we can learn from it. And hopefully that will inform us on the most efficient way to complete the next part of it, which is some of the more complex requests as far as how the field handles hydraulic loads and how it handles nutrient loads and how that impacts Martis and the Truckee River. So yeah, we're just waiting for a little bit more refined scope on that and a fee so that we can bring it to the board for approval.
Yeah, just a bit on that one, we did get some rough costing that's included in the budget this year, so that is reflected in the budget. And this is part of the asking for an updated WDR for to go to NPDES, so let's give it a little more background.
That's correct. So in the laboratory, we discussed it earlier, Kristen Check was promoted to chemist 3, so congratulations to her. We are in the process of replacing a lot of aging equipment in the laboratory. There's stuff that exceeds what I've normally seen for depreciation time on laboratory equipment. I'm used to seeing around 15 years. There's several things that are approaching 16, 17 years that are starting to show their age. So we've actually budgeted this year and next year to replace some of the higher dollar equipment in the laboratory. I believe, last time I had mentioned we replaced a piece of equipment that's around 40 grand. So those kinds of equipment, compared to a pump, not super expensive, but in the lab world, it feels pricey. And we have just started beginning the annual river monitoring. So every year around this time, we started monitoring for paraphytants and benthic invertebrates in both Martis and Truckee River. So kind of an impact to staffing and a little bit more field work. Might play a little bit into that conversation about the part-time employment that we had mentioned during the budget process. One pending corrective action and none completed. Public outreach, this could not happen without all the support from ops. They give an amazing tour. We had Tahoe City staff and a couple of board members out yesterday that was Greg O'Hare gave a tremendous, tour and they had a great time. So it was, I just cannot thank, ops staff enough for that. As Michael had mentioned, we had, staff from Tumwater came up and, they're working on some upgrades and repairs. And we are working on some upgrades and repairs. So we had a really good discussion. We are gonna now reciprocate that, go visit their facility sometime in July. There will be opportunity for potential spots on that tour for board members if anyone's interested. But they have several technologies down there that they have either implemented or have assessed that we can probably glean a ton of information. Corolla has helped them with several of their projects as well. So hopefully there's a nexus there that we can kind of help each other out a little bit on some of the information sharing. As mentioned, we participated in Truckee Day. We've got some photos of that this time. This time I promised and didn't do them. But yeah, and then as mentioned, the music festival, hopefully we'll get a hopefully get some staff there to put out word.
Great, thanks, Jason. Any questions from the board for engineering? Technical services, I should say. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, great that you guys are doing this public outreach work. That's really nice.
Okay, this will be the last time you talk, I promise, to this group today. Finance did the things that finance is supposed to do. Vendors got paid, people got paid, things got processed. We attended the finance committee. We continue to work on the FY 25 budget process. I would like to say thank you not only to the management team here, but their staff that they had help, and Michelle. My brain would not have been able to function for the FY 25 budget if it wasn't for Michelle putting it into the financial system and answering all of my questions. So I greatly appreciate that. On the billing customer service side, again, we did the things. There were 2 commercial property inspections. We have pictures this time, which never happens. But some of the team attended safety day and cleanup Truckee day. So there's some photos for that coming. On the next slide for purchasing did all the things they were supposed to, and I'm starting to come up with process for FY 25 as we talked about earlier. And we also performed various things that the general manager or the board of directors requested of us. Now for the pictures. So they went to coffee bar, which is place right now for coffee, to do an inspection, and then Dawn and Celeste went to baby day. It's not often Adam gets pictures, so it's really an insight. Then you'll be happy to do it.
Great, thanks, Liz. Questions, comments for Liz, admin, finance? Thank you for all the stuff today. And I think we're moving on to the GM report.
So as we continue to talk about leadership development, we have schedule set, the kickoff schedule, and working on the final attendee list. We had more people that aren't in current leadership roles request to come to prepare themselves for the future, which is great. However, we have a limited number of spots, so we're working with Vicky. We're gonna have those individuals that are interested write up a quick reason why they want to come to the training, and then we'll make final selection based on why they want to be there. Continuing work with Gallagher on the stuff as Vicky mentioned. Master plan rehab projects with the budget have been a big workload. We got out the schedule for the land exchange with the Tallahassee Airport, so if there's any comments or questions on that, I'll field those. It is progressing. I do have the amended lease agreement in this folder, waiting for Blake's signature to execute that with them, and then working with legal on amended agreement lease with TVQD for the well site. As mentioned, nutrient removal, digestion improvement projects continue to go. Local area GM meeting, touching base on Aaron from the Tahoe housing hub. Kind of taking it on the ownership of reaching out to the other agencies who are affected by the ADUs. And trying to coordinate and all meetings, so we're all in the same room and can hear their concerns and just have an open dialogue on it. Seems like there's a lot of discussion about how the regulations or the legislation is interpreted. So working on that one. Truckee River Revitalization Steering Committee, continue to sit in on those. The focus continues to be public outreach and kind of putting together what the plan is gonna look like along that corridor. And I continue to explain to them as my representation, I don't weigh in on what the plan looks like. It's more about how it might affect us in terms of looking at receiver sites. Safety Day, as mentioned, Truckee Day, really doing a lot of outreach. I want to really thank those that have participated. Jason's done a great job of empowering people to participate. We're getting a lot of staff activity and participation out of that. Tours, necessary hazmat training that we went through this month. We had the Renaissance game. Apologize again for some of the snafus on that. We will refine that for the next event for sure. And then we have sent out the draft newsletter for input, and I received some input, and we're still waiting on some additional input come back. We'll incorporate all that and then send it back out for further review and comment before we reach a final version of that and send it out. Recruitment continue. We've finally gotten some good news with a couple recruitments. Paul also had a picture of that bright new shiny loader. Just want to say that we auctioned off the old one and got 47,000 for it. So that was 17,000 more than the trade-in value. So that worked out really well. Other than that, as y'all know, 4th of July coming, so holiday closure. We have some staff on training, and then vacations, hence the reason for the Gallagher study that getting pushed out a little further than what we anticipated. Plus there's a lot of data we got back that we can kind of validate through. And I'll share the staff has done their research as well. Very thorough. I'll give them credit for that, but it raises the question, how do we validate that? And that's kind of what we're drafting as well.
What kind of research?
They did cost of living research. They actually looked at the comparable agencies, the areas there. Did research on cost of gas, groceries of various types, purchasing a home, rental of homes. So specific items that affect the cost of living, they developed a little group and reached out to those areas and did that, so. Any other questions?
Questions for the GM? Thanks, Richard, keeping everybody busy.
It is, I'll just say it too, is, we developed with the music fest, I heard the concerns, as we finalize the agreement before we do it, I will let you know what we're agreeing to get final input before I sign, just in case there can be a red flag with anybody, and I'll make sure they get the contact with Tykert and, like I said, I mentioned that to them, because the way Tykert runs, it'll get it very dicey really quick.
Yeah.
So hopefully they'll be able to shut down. I did put that it was incidental cost for the agency as far as working the draft agreement. If it works out that we close the road, we might have some overtime for having someone kind of monitor that, to help make sure people aren't moving barricades and coming down. I don't necessarily want to fully rely on their security staff. So. Keep getting the loop.
Richard, anything else, the GM at this time? Thank you, busy meeting. Let's move to Board of Directors comments. Scott?
I appreciate the input from staff.
Yeah. Dave?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Richard and staff for hosting our general manager from Alpine. I think I was taking more confusion to our board. They were asking questions like, what was our future plan to supply drinking water to Glenshire? And I don't think I was very clear. And thank you very much for talking with Joe, and he helped me out a lot.
You're welcome. Very happy to host them.
Dale? None. Great. There was some good input from, public comment on the connection fee. and the board, you know, staff wants to not directing you guys to do anything at this point, but to consider that the washing machine question was an interesting one. We did change our code, so we got 6-7 months before we revisit that, or it gets implemented, so regarding the connection fee study, you know, we didn't really talk about it, but I want to emphasize the importance of reaching out to the member agencies. You guys are fortunate. We are fortunate that the member agencies actually are the ones that are gonna be telling the customers that their connection fee has gone up 80%. And there should be good outreach to give them the why, because people are gonna wanna know why. And so, educating all of our agencies, you know, that they've given them plenty of a heads up and, you know, FaceTime with you guys so that they've got a good script to be able to give to folks. It's a nice service that we all do in terms of that. And so just make sure that you will reach out to them. Great. And then let's keep our eyes on items where we've got long items and then guests that are showing up that could be dealt with probably quicker and try and get them at the front of the meeting, I thought.
Yeah,
I've been making those folks sit through there, but they said they learned something, so that's good.
I was surprised that, we only had 2 people that, commented on our connection fee increase, and I was anticipating a.
Connection fees are future users, so they don't exist yet, so it's hard to drum it up, so I was glad to see though, at least Kat did show up in the housing hub. Okay, we'll close at this point. The open portion of the meeting and go into closed session. Why don't we take like this fast of, I've got something I've got to get back to at work, so I'd like to try and
Yeah, me too.
try and get through the closed session as quickly as possible, so like.